Hello, BISC1323. This is the beginning of recorded lecture 4.3. We're still in the chapter on vertebrates, although we're going to finish it up now. Last time I introduced mammals and talked about some of their basic characteristics, as well as the three clades, monotremes, marsupials, and placental mammals. Now, I want to look at some, again, we're not hitting every single one, so there are going to be some mammals you can think of that maybe aren't covered here, but some of the more major orders of specifically placental mammals. So let's start off with order Rodentia. As the name Rodentia heavily implies, these are rodents, mice and squirrels and chipmunks and capybara and beaver. I think I'm just going to call out rats, mice, and squirrels. But yeah, Rodentia means rats, mice, and squirrels. Next up is order Lagomorpha. Lagomorpha is rabbits and hares. Pretty straightforward here. And yeah, as I break down these orders, I'm really just giving a couple of notable members for most of these orders. Lagomorpha means rabbits and hares. Up next, we've got primates. Primates includes monkeys, apes, ourselves, bush babies, tarsiers, eyes, lemurs, some weird things, but the big ones are monkeys and humans, are primates. Next, we have a group called Perissodactyla. So Perissodactyla is a group also known as odd-toed ungulates. So ungulate is an important key term here. It is a mammal that uses the tips of their toes or hooves to walk on. So Perissodactyla is specifically these four-legged mammals walking around on their toes that have an odd number of toes. So I called out horses and rhinos here. Zebras are closely related to horses, so that also includes donkeys and stuff, and rhinos and tapirs too. But I think I just said horses and rhinos. If we look closely at their toes, we can see horses are walking around on one toe. That's what a hoof is. It's a single toe and a fingernail, or toenail. And rhinos have three. So these are both odd numbers, which is why Perissodactyla is also known as odd-toed ungulates. That kind of implies the existence of even-toed ungulates, which is the next one, Set-Artiodactyla. These are even-toed ungulates, and I think I called out here cows, pigs, and hippos. But of course, cows include deer and bison, a lot of things closely related to cows. Pigs. That's a story for another day. So these are toothed whales are not ungulates at all, but they evolved from a part of Set-Artiodactyla. So yeah, they're a member of this group, even though they don't have any hooves at all. But the main ones here would be cows, pigs, and hippos. And if you want a close-up here, cow hoof, two digits here, pigs also walking around on two, and here's a hippo foot walking around on four. 2 and 4 are even numbers, even-toed ungulates. Okay, next up, we've got carnivora. Now, the name implies that these things are carnivores, and that's definitely true for many of these, like all the big cats. But most of these are omnivorous in some way. There are even some herbivores within carnivora, so it is kind of just a name. But for the most part, these are, with some exceptions, these are primarily carnivorous mammals. So I think I'm just calling out cats, dogs, and bears as notable members of carnivora. And one more, because again, I'm not doing every single order, just some of the bigger ones, Chiroptera. And these are bats. So this is one that's easy to forget about because we don't really see these things because they're nocturnal. But when you hear Chiroptera, that's referring to the order of bats. Now, of all of these orders, there's one that I want to talk about in a little bit more detail. And, there's an argument to be made for talking about the biggest one in more detail. The biggest one is, of course, Rodentia. But the one that I want to talk about more is not Rodentia. It's not the biggest. It's not even the second biggest. But I want to talk more about primates because it's the order that we are members of. So what can I say more about primates? Well, there are a couple of important features that primates have. One of these is grasping fingers and or toes with opposable thumbs. So, I mean, you can look at your own hand, but here's an ape hand showing these grasping fingers, and this is also showing the opposable thumb, meaning it goes in the opposite direction of the rest of the digits. Compare this to a bear paw, for example, non-opposable thumb. They're all facing the same direction, so a bear would not be able to pick things up and handle them very well, but monkeys and apes, primates, definitely can because of this opposable thumb digit. The other feature, and yeah, this is not unique to primates. There are other mammals that have opposable thumbs, but all primates have opposable thumbs. Another feature associated with primates is something called stereoscopic vision. So we can contrast this with monoscopic vision. So, okay, here on the left, we have what's called monoscopic vision. So this is a rabbit we're looking at. And in this type of vision, the eyes are positioned on the sides of the head. This gives these animals an incredibly wide view of their surroundings. It is very difficult to sneak up on a rabbit, for example, because they could see, in a wide field around themselves. So this is great for prey species that are constantly on the lookout for something trying to get them. The downside to this type of vision is that they have very bad depth perception. Very little of what they are seeing with both of their eyes, so it's difficult for them to judge depth. In contrast, this says monkey, but this is true of all primates. This stereoscopic vision means most of what you're seeing is with both of your eyes. So we've got great depth perception and judgment of distance. The downside with having, both eyes sort of facing forward is that we have this massive blind zone behind us where we can't see anything. But with our lifestyle of climbing and carrying things, using tools, throwing things, having this kind of depth perception is absolutely something that's important for us. So stereoscopic vision is another order primates trait. Eyes on the front of the face for better depth perception. And again, primates are not the only animals that have this type of vision, but it's definitely something that all primates have. Now, the reason I picked primates to talk a little bit more about is because of us, because we're part of this order. So I also want to mention in brief some key points in the evolution of humans. What makes us different from all these other primates? Well, there are two main characteristics here that distinguish us from other primates. One of these is bipedalism. So other mammals, certainly other primates, walk around on four limbs. They walk around on their knuckles and their feet. But if we look at humans and some of the close human ancestors, there is a transition from knuckle walking around on four limbs, to what's called bipedalism, walking around on two limbs. Evolutionarily, it's thought to have enabled us to use tools, to construct tools, to use these two limbs that we're not bearing weight on to, carry stuff with us. Going hand in hand with, being able to carry tools is being able to construct and use tools, which our enlarged brain, again, compared to other close human ancestors and, going back to other apes, we definitely have a larger brain compared to other primates. And so an enlarged brain is also an important feature, which enabled us to construct and use these complex tools that now we have two extra limbs to carry around with us and make use of. So there's obviously a lot more to it than this, but this is, a quick description of some of these key points in human evolution. Okay. Now that we're done with phylogeny, we finished our chapter on vertebrates. Now we're going to still continuing to talk about animals, but about animal form and physiology. So the whole rest of the quarter is going to be about physiology, different organ systems for the most part, nervous systems, immune systems, circulatory systems. But before we can get into any of those specific systems, we have this quick kind of dry chapter about basic form and function. This is going to run through different tissue types. And again, it is kind of a dry chapter, but we're going to use these tissues. We're going to apply what we learn here in further chapters. let's start out by talking about epithelial tissue. So epithelial tissue is sometimes thought of as skin, but it's way more than just skin. This is the tissue that lines the outside of our body, but also the inside of our body. Remember, our bodies are basically tubes. So this lines the entire gastrointestinal tract from mouth to anus, as well as the outside of the body as well. There are two types of epithelial tissue based on how many layers of cells are stacked on one another. If there's just a single layer of cells, it's called simple epithelial tissue. If there are a bunch of layers stacked up, it's called stratified. I do have pictures of this, by the way, just to, hold on for a second. Because in addition to these two types based on the number of layers, we also have three types based on the shape of those cells. If the cells are flat, we call them squamous. If the cells are shaped like a cube, about as wide as they are tall, we call them cuboidal. And if they're shaped like a column in architecture, taller than they are wide, we call them columnar. So we have these three types based on shape, these two types based on number of layers. That gives us a lot of different combinations. You got simple squamous and stratified squamous and simple cuboidal and stratified cuboidal, simple columnar, stratified columnar. There's even another one that I'm not talking about, but we have lots of different ways to build epithelial tissue. What are we going to do with all of these things? Well, what we find is the structure of epithelial tissue fits the function of the epithelial tissue. So let's consider stratified squamous. I'm not going to do all 6 of these. Let's just look at a few of them. So an epithelial tissue, the structure fits the function. Stratified squamous is going to look like this. We have lots and lots and lots of layers of cells. They're thin and flat, so they stack on top of one another. This makes for a thick, protective sheet of tissue. The structure fits the function, so where would we want thick, protective tissue? Well, we would want this on our skin, our outer skin, and our mouth as well, where we want that protection above all else. So that's where we would find this type of tissue. Let's look at another one. Simple squamous. This is kind of the exact opposite. Simple squamous is as thin as it gets. It's a single cell layer thick, and yeah, this is underlying tissue. This is not epithelial tissue, but here you can see the single thin layer of these cells. And being so thin, they're really bad at protecting the underlying tissue, but they're really good at letting things diffuse into the underlying tissue. So we would want these in a part of the body where we want stuff to be able to go in and out of the underlying tissue. Specifically, a great place where we want diffusion to occur is in the lungs. And so this type of tissue, simple squamous, is going to line the walls of the lungs. One more example, simple columnar. So simple columnar cells are, a single layer because they're simple, and they're columnar. So these types of cells are really good at absorbing stuff because they have a big cytoplasm where they can store up the things that they absorb. They are also really good at secreting enzymes and secreting stuff because, again, they have a huge cytoplasm that can store up things that they can secrete out. So simple columnar is really good at absorption and secretion. Where in the body would we want to absorb and secrete stuff? Well, digestive tract is a good place. So we're going to see simple columnar tissue lining the digestive tract. Okay, so that was epithelial tissue. Now let's talk about connective tissue. So as the name implies, this is tissue that connects something to something else. But as we will see, some connective tissue does that, but there's also some weird connective tissue that doesn't really connect anything, but they all fall under this umbrella of connective tissue. So there are several types. Let's start with loose connective tissue. It's called loose because, things are connected, but kind of loosely. So there are cells here called fibroblasts. That's a type of cell. You can see the nucleus here. But there are also these loosely associated fibers of various proteins that connect things to other things, but again, not very tightly, kind of loosely. So in loose connective tissue, we've got fibroblasts, parentheses, these are cells, that's a type of cell, in a matrix of protein and water. Where would we want this kind of loose connection? Well, we're going to see this surrounding the internal organs. Skipping ahead, this is a slide from the digestive system, but we want all these things, the small intestine and the large intestine and the liver, we want them connected to one another. We don't want this liver, sort of flipping and spinning around. So we want it staying in place, but we want our abdomen to be squishy. We want it to be able to move. We want some give to it. So everything in here is connected to everything else through this loose type of connective tissue. It surrounds our internal organs. In contrast to this loose connective tissue, we also find in the body fibrous connective tissue, which is a more dense, tough connection. And so, yeah, here you can see these fibroblast cells, there's the nucleus, and lots of fibers of protein just really stacked onto one another. Not a lot of water, not a lot of empty space here. So this is going to make a much denser, stronger type of connection. Where would we want this in the body? Well, yeah, so fibrous connective tissue, protein with some fibroblasts and little water, but it's mostly protein. We're going to want this in tendons and ligaments. So tendons connect muscle to bone, like the Achilles tendon, and ligaments connect bones to other bones. We want these to be much stronger connections than this loose kind of stuff connecting the internal organs. So again, this is also structure function stuff. This is what they're good at, and so this is where we would find this type of tissue. Another type of connective tissue is cartilage. So cartilage isn't necessarily connecting something to something else. Cartilage makes up part of our skeleton and provides strength to our skeleton. So here's what cartilage looks like. Again, we can see some cells with their nuclei. It's these cells called chondrocytes in a matrix of protein and water and stuff. And yes, it is part of our skeleton. You may see the chondrocyte cell name that may sound familiar. Remember the group of cartilaginous fishes called chondrichthyes, the sharks? Well, that's where it comes from. Chondrichthyes and chondrocytes. They're referring to the same thing, cartilage. So if cartilage was part of our skeleton, and that's connective tissue, it stands to reason that bone, which is also part of our skeleton, is also connective tissue, and that's definitely true. So if we look at a cross-section of bone and sort of zoom in, we could see that these are living cells here, these osteocytes that secrete these calcium salts that make up this bone. So it's not just a dead structure. There are living cells in here that are responsible for building and maintaining this. So this is a type of tissue, living cells in a matrix hardened with various calcium salts. And yeah, along with cartilage, this is also part of the skeleton. Another connective tissue is adipose tissue. Adipose tissue is fat. Here's what it looks like. Again, these giant cells swollen up, filled with lipids. And yeah, adipose tissue is used for insulation, and it's also used for energy storage. Another connective tissue is blood. And again, we're getting into weird connective tissue. It's not necessarily connecting something to something else, but it is a type of connective tissue. I'm not going to talk about blood here. We're going to talk about this in way more detail in a later chapter or later chapters as we talk about the immune system and the circulatory system. But for now, just note that blood is a type of connective tissue. Our next tissue type is muscle tissue. There are 3 types of muscle tissue. I told you this was kind of a dry chapter, right? The first one is called smooth muscle. Its appearance is smooth. I don't know what to tell you. The name fits. Smooth muscle has an overall smooth appearance. But it's not the muscle that you typically think of when you're like flexing a bicep or whatever. Smooth muscle is found in the walls of our blood vessels and lining our digestive tract. These muscles are not they're involuntarily controlled. We don't consciously have to think about digesting our food, for example. This happens without conscious thought, so involuntary muscle. The muscle that you do think about, flexing a bicep, is skeletal muscle, which has more of a striped appearance. I know this is a cartoon drawing and not a microscope image, but even under a microscope you can see these striations or these striped. So we describe skeletal muscle as being striated or striped. And yeah, this is attached to bones by tendons. So this is what we voluntarily move or contract in order to move the bones that are connected to those muscles in order to, walk around and talk and pick things up and, all of that stuff. This is our skeletal muscle. And the third type is highly specialized, only located in one part of the body, but obviously very important. Cardiac muscle is heart muscle. It's not much to look at. You can see these intercalated discs that kind of help them talk to one another, but overall cardiac muscle, I just want to say that this is located in the heart. And this is also involuntarily controlled. You don't have to consciously make your heart beat or you die. It happens without you voluntarily thinking about it. One more tissue type, and we're done with this chapter, and that is nerve tissue. So there aren't a bunch of different types of nerve tissue, but there are two distinct types of cells that make up nerve tissue. We can see both of them in this figure here. We see a neuron, it's the yellow thing here, and we see a couple of different examples of neuroglia associated with the neuron. Let's talk about the neuron first. So every neuron has three parts to it. We've got the cell body, which is the biggest part, and it contains most of the cytoplasm and the nucleus. We have the axon, typically a singular extension, long extension coming from the cell body. And we've got the dendrites. These are branched extensions of the cell body, and there are typically many, many, many of these. So cell body, most of cell contains nucleus. Dendrites are the branched extensions from the cell body. The axon is the single long extension from the cell body. We're going to talk about how these things do what they do in our nervous system chapter, but the other type of nerve tissue we need to point out here is called neuroglia. So these things are labeled astrocyte and oligodendrocyte, and there are a bunch others, but really the job of these and other neuroglia is to support the function of these neurons. So just in general, what neuroglia does in a lot of different ways is they support and they protect these neurons. Okay, so this is going to segue into our nervous system chapter, but that's something that I don't want to start until the next one. So this is the end of recorded lecture 4.3.